The Ministry of Defence has revealed that RAF fighters were scrambled after a Russian warplane flew dangerously close to the Royal Navy's flagship HMS Prince of Wales. The incident happened over the Norwegian Sea last week and comes on the eve of the much-anticipated NATO summit, which begins tomorrow in Turkey. Tensions remain high between NATO allies, with President Trump repeatedly criticising Europe over defence spending and its reluctance to get involved in the US-Israeli attacks on Iran. General Sir Richard Sheriff, former NATO Deputy Supreme Allied Commander for Europe, spoke to John Pienaar on Times Radio Drive and said this is what Europe should look to achieve at the summit.
No, there's no question that Putin will be sitting back and watching a NATO that talks the talk but has been undermined by America. And if I may say so, the so what out of this is that what we should be seeing at this alliance, at this summit, is European member states getting together, looking America in the eye and making it 100% clear that they will meet the requirement to defend Europe conventionally on their own, with Europe and Canada together, and put in place a strategy to achieve that.
Well, we can speak now to John Lough, Head of Foreign Policy at the New Eurasian Strategy Centre and a former NATO representative to Russia. Good evening to you, John.
Good evening, Carole.
Great to have you with us. First of all, this incident over the Royal Navy flagship, which was taking part in a big NATO exercise, just the latest incident involving Russian planes, warships, submarines, right on the eve of this summit. What do you think is the significance of that?
I wouldn't read too much into it. I think this sort of classic Russian posturing, showing us that they can make us nervous, and it's not just happening to the UK, it's happening to other countries as well, although I think the UK seems to be very much in the Russian sights at the moment, partly because they have to be nice to the Americans, and there's all this sort of historical fact with the UK. They tend to overestimate our importance. They accuse us of whenever anything goes wrong in Russia, seriously wrong, somehow there must be a UK hand behind it. They think we're doing an awful lot to support Ukraine. They remember Boris Johnson's encouraging words to the Ukrainians at the beginning of the big war. So we are very much a factor. So I think we just have to live with the fact that they're going to continue to test us. And we have to be able to respond and show that we have the willingness and indeed the capability to, if it's necessary, sort of put them in their place and show them that we're able to play this game.
And of course, future support for Ukraine is going to be one of the big themes at the summit. We've just seen yet another devastating Russian attack on Kyiv. But there's no indication, is there, that President Trump is prepared to do more? He is once again going to be insisting that it is the Europeans that shoulder that burden.
Well, that's certainly true, but he's indicating that he wants to try to restart the so-called peace process between Russia and Ukraine. He has so far been unsuccessful in trying to bridge the gap between the two sides. You may remember the famous Anchorage summit last August that promised much but achieved absolutely nothing in the end. But it seems that President Putin may be keen to involve Trump again, because Putin is in something of a bind at the moment, because the Ukrainians have struck back very successfully using their enhanced drone capabilities, and they have caused a fuel crisis in Russia that is in fact going to be, for the Russians, quite difficult to address.
We know that, of course, President Trump has been railing against European NATO allies over funding. We've got Keir Starmer in one of his last big foreign engagements before he leaves office, and he comes after that huge row over the lack of funding for the defence investment plan. Do you think that potentially President Trump, who's apparently likely to be sitting next to Keir Starmer, could embarrass our outgoing Prime Minister?
Well, it's certainly possible, because Trump is so unpredictable. I mean, the two men seem to have a perfectly decent relationship, 6 months ago. But Trump was certainly irked by the UK's hesitation when it came to supporting the US and Israel logistically in recent months. So it seems that he simply regards Keir Starmer as, I think, already as yesterday's man. So why does he need to deal with him at this stage? And what's he going to make of his successor? These are all open questions. But I think the NATO allies are hoping that they can somehow get over this bump in the road by demonstrating to Trump that they are prepared to step up, they are going to invest what's needed, they are going to take care of Europe's defense, and they'll only call on the United States in extremis. So for Trump, that would be, of course, a very satisfying result, because he would have been the only US leader really to have, I think, successfully communicated this message to the Europeans and got them to dig deep in their pockets and actually start building their own defense capability, of course, within a NATO framework, but making themselves capable to look after Europe's defense.
John Lough, Head of Foreign Policy at the New Eurasian Strategy Centre, former NATO representative to Russia. Great to get your insight tonight. Thank you so much.
Keir Starmer attends his last summit as Prime Minister. Today he's at a meeting of NATO allies in Turkey that gets away in an hour's time. Will he get a telling off from Donald Trump about his defence investment plan? The Times understands US officials say the plan shows no clear path to reaching a 3.5% of GDP contribution by 2035. That's the NATO contribution the US is demanding. Larisa Brown is the Times defence editor, and she's an anchor for the meeting. Larisa, morning to you.
Good morning.
What's the point of this meeting?
Wow, good question. The point of the meeting is, if you look at it from the European perspective, they want to be able to show Donald Trump that they're investing a lot of money in defence. They want to show Russia that they're serious about defending Europe. Donald Trump probably wants to use this meeting to berate all of his allies and tell them that they need to spend far more on defence. And he's going to be looking at member states and how far they are progressing in terms of reaching that 3.5% pledge that they made last year, where they've all committed to be spending that by 2035.
So one of the points of the meeting, which is true of many meetings many people will have in their own places of work, is to survive the meeting.
Yes, probably for Sir Keir Starmer. It's going to be incredibly awkward for him. We've already heard, as you've just said, from a US official, NATO official last night, who are concerned that the UK is not obviously setting out that credible path to 3.5%. They've said, a US official told me that the UK's pledges on defence are faltering, and Starmer's going into the summit without that clear path and without actually a completely funded defence investment plan. If you remember last week, we only saw 4 years out of 10 years of that equipment plan actually invested.
I was very struck by something. We had the Norwegian ambassador to NATO on the programme earlier, and I said to her, you do realise that no one thinks we're on a path to not 3.5%. The defence investment plan was unfunded and underfunded. And I don't know if this is the diplomatic view of everyone in NATO, not Trump, which is just not to rock the boat and just say, well done for the UK for having a defence investment plan, we're all in this together. Is that what people are doing, or behind the scenes are they being more pointed in their criticism, do you think?
I think that probably goes for other European countries. A lot of them also haven't set out the path to 3.5%. But I think when it comes to Donald Trump, he doesn't mince his words, does he? And I think he's going to be pretty happy at shouting at all of his allies. And if he's asked a question about the UK, I'm sure he'll be happy to say that it's not doing enough, basically.
I wonder whether the fact that Starmer's now resigned, does that make this easier or harder for him? Because Trump is a sentimental guy in some respects. I could just about him seeing not put the boot in because Starmer's already out, or I could see him saying what he actually thinks. I don't quite know which way he goes in that.
Probably think he's more likely to say what he thinks. I don't know. It does feel a bit humiliating for Starmer that he's been forced out. He's having to attend this massive summit. He's there with all the world leaders, and yet nobody's going to really be too bothered about what he's saying, because they know that in a few days' time Andy Burnham will be in power. So it's an incredibly tough 24 hours for him.
Will they know Burnham, do you think? Will people have an idea of who Burnham is? I know that Trump said he's run a big town somewhere. I just wonder whether will the ghost of Burnham be there, or will that be for another day, do you think?
I think people won't really know who Andy Burnham is at this stage. I'm sure they'll have been Googling him over the last few days, but I'm sure a few weeks ago they wouldn't have known who the Mayor of Greater Manchester was. But obviously they've got to get to know him, and he'll obviously be there at the next summit.
Yeah, he certainly will. Just on Ukraine, because that's on many people's mind when you think about NATO and you think about these summits. Is there anything solid they want to get out of this? How will Ukraine be presented and discussed at this summit?
Well, Zelensky's meant to be meeting Trump at the summit. Obviously, a lot of the meetings will be about what more can be done to support Ukraine, what more Europe can do to beef up its defences, especially on the eastern flank. There's been reports over the last few days about concerns in Poland and also the Baltic states about Russia ramping up its attacks potentially. So it's going to be a big topic of conversation. Obviously, this meeting today, which is about defence industry, and lots of defence companies are also here in Ankara, they'll be wanting to show that they've got, kit that can be proven, used on the battlefield immediately against Russia, and they'll be wanting to show Trump as well that they're investing in ramping up the defences in Europe.
And just finally, will Trump make himself available to the media? I think the last NATO summit, he sat there, didn't he, with Rutte? I think it's where Rutte said that they called him Daddy. That whole line came from that. And then people were allowed to ask him questions. Is that going to happen again, do you think?
I'm hoping so. I mean, last time I queued for several hours to get to the front of the press room, and then the Americans came in shortly before Trump came on and forced all the European journalists to move a few rows back, which was incredibly infuriating. And Trump in a press room is completely different to the way the Europeans operate. So, before we had Rutte has a press person that would pick out the journalists, whereas Donald Trump picks out the journalists himself. So everybody's desperately trying to get a question. The American media operate in a completely different way to us. They will stand up, shout things. We're all very polite normally, but by the end of last year's press conference, all the British journalists were also shouting to try and get Trump's attention. It did work for some of us. I have packed specifically a block colour because I did notice because I noticed at last year's press conference, Trump seemed to pick on people where he could easily say, lady in red, lady in blue, man in white or whatever, and I was wearing a stripy shirt, so I am convinced that is why I did not get a question. So I'll be wearing a block purple top tomorrow.
Larissa, this is what I'm interested in, how you make these things work.
Strategy.
Yeah, get your elbows out, Larissa, you'll do a great job. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
That's Larisa Brown, the Times Defence editor in Ankara.